Ladies and gentlemen, it is my pleasure to present the work published in a paper titled Evaluation of Deep Neural Networks-Based Acoustic Modeling Techniques Used for Low-Quality Polish Speech Recordings. My name is Marek, JASZUK, and the other members of the team are Leszek GAJECKI, Teresa MROCZEK, Leszek PUZIO, and Grażyna SZOSTEK, and we come from University of Information Technology and Management, which is located in Rzeszów in southeast Poland. The results come from the project titled IVA Service Platform of Virtual Voice Agent to automate the operation of emergency call centers. The goal of our work was to develop an efficient acoustic model which could be used in a call center as a part of automatic speech recognition system. And the research was focused on the Polish language, which has a number of difficulties when compared to the English. First of all is the lack of data. The problem is the lack of data because there is only one data set with call center recordings in the Polish language. The data set is called Luna, and this data was used in our experiments. But unfortunately, we were not able to compare this data or extend the data set on which we could train our model. The other difficulties related to telephonic recording is the low quality of sound, which results from using the telephonic codecs, and another problems like noises. The speech is more spontaneous and speakers doesn't follow grammatical rules so strictly, and also frequently express emotions. So the spoken language, spontaneous spoken language, is much more difficult for the purpose of creating automatic speech recognition system, because the structure of the expressions, of the language expressions, is much more informal when compared to written text. Now let's have a look at a few details about the Luna corpus. So there are 562 speech recordings coming from individual telephonic conversations with total duration of 13 hours and 20 minutes. And for each of the conversations, we have the audio file and TRS file with transcription, which contains data about the speakers and transcriptions of utterances and durations. So in total, there are 12,788 utterances in the Luna dataset. The number of words is 81,049, and the dictionary size is 7,768. There were 255 recordings for male speakers and 276 recordings for female speakers. And now let's have a look at the language model. So the speech recognition starts from the most basic acoustic units, such as triphones. In our approach, these are triphones. And the acoustic model is responsible for recognizing triphones, but the goal of speech recognition is to recognize the words, the longer units, which consist of acoustic units. And to recognize the words, we are using lexicon. The lexicon is created once and it doesn't undergo any training process. But actually, lexicon is not sufficient to recognize the words, to identify the words from the acoustic units. We are using the decoding graph, which is constructed using lexicon. So the decoding graph contains all the possible paths in which notes are acoustic units that constitute words. Additionally, for notes representing words, there is superimposed language model. The class of speech recognition system which is under consideration is called large vocabulary continuous speech recognition. In such system, the task is to find the most probable sequence of words which have the sequence of acoustic features. To find this probability, we define the Causal acoustic hypothesis, and this hypothesis combines the knowledge coming from two modules as probabilities from acoustic model, probability of a language model, penalty for starting new words, and weight of acoustic model. The language model defines all possible word sequences and gives the word probability under condition of previous words, which is given by the first formula. We are using so-called Ngram models in which the length of the context is limited to n. And finally, the probability of recognized word sequence is given by the formula in the bottom. The whole data set is divided into three parts, in which utterances are selected randomly. The first part is used for training, which consists of 60% of all utterances. The second part of the data set is used for validation purpose, which consists of about 30% of all utterances, and the third part is used for evaluation, and this consists of 10% of the whole data set. Now a few more words about experimental setup. The hybrid weight for the null model was set to 0.9, and it was obtained for the smallest perplexity on the validation set. The perplexity, which is a measure of language model quality, is expressed by the top formula. We used in the system two trephone-based acoustic models called TRI-3A and TRI-4A, and these models consisted of 1578 and 1596 trephone type states respectively. The performance of the system was evaluated in terms of word error rate, and this metric is computed using Levenstein distance between recognized sequence and the original sequence, and it is expressed in percentage as follows in the bottom formula. Dn is the number of words, d is the number of deletions, s is the number of substitutions, and I is the number of insertion errors. We conducted the experiments on 11 deep neural network configurations, and in the first step, over 100 tests were conducted on the unigram language model, and several network configurations were checked to verify the impact of elements of the deep neural network topology and training decoding parameters on the recognition efficiency. The input configuration of the best networks was composed of 40-dimensional Mer frequency Cepstral component vectors and 100-dimensional I vectors. The first time delay neural network blocks received as input a 220-dimensional LDA transformed feature vector, which was a concatenation of the I vector with spliced 3 consecutive MFCC vectors. The first convolutional neural network blocks received as input 40-dimensional MEL filter banks, which was created by inverse conversion IDCT of MFCCs. The CNN block performed ReLU activation and batch normalization, which are typical for convolutional neural networks, and the first block used 256 filters, and the second block 128 filters of size 3 times 3. Each time delay neural network block consisted of typical deep neural network operations like ReLU, activation, and batch normalizations. In order to improve generalization of the deep neural network model, we also use the dropout method in some time delay neural network blocks. This image shows the number of layers and the structure of the 3 best neural networks that allowed us to construct the best acoustic models. So starting from the left, the network consists of the convolutional neural network, time delay neural network layers, and BLSTM layers. The second in the middle consisted of convolutional layers, time delay neural network layers, LSTM layers, and BLSTM layers. And the last one consisted of convolutional neural networks, time delay neural networks, and GRU layers. This slide presents the details of training of the 3 best neural network configurations mentioned in the previous slide. So in case of the CNN, TDNN, and BLSTM network, the training took 4 epochs, and it was based on chunks of 90 frames, and the size of mini batches was 64 chunks. In case of CNN, TDNN, LSTM, and BLSTM network, it was trained for 6 epochs based on chunks of 140 frames, and the size of mini batches was 32 chunks. And the third network was CNN, TDNN, GRU. This slide shows the whole speech recognition system performance for the 2 versions of the language model, namely the Unigram and the Bigram language model. The vertical axis presents the word error rate expressed in %, and the colors indicate the one of the acoustic models used in the system. And the results are presented for the validation set and for the evaluation set. And starting from the left, we have the results obtained for the Unigram language model, and on the right hand side of the image we have the result obtained for the Bigram language model. As one can see, the results are obtained for the Bigram language model are clearly better, which is not a surprising fact. This slide presents the result that we were able to obtain using standard acoustic modeling technique based on Gaussian mixture model and hidden Markov model. And as one can see, the results are much higher. The results, of course, were produced using the same data sets and the same language models. So this result clearly indicates that the deep neural networks is much more efficient modeling technique than the classical GMM, HMM models. To summarize the results, we should say that we compared 11 different neural network configurations, and we applied over 100 different control parameter settings, and the performance of the most efficient networks was better than the well-known GMM, HMM models, and this result was obtained for each of the 2 investigated language models. The best results were obtained for the neural network that combines the convolutional neural network, time delay neural network, and GRU network with the Ngram model. As one could see, the water rate is relatively high, and the main factor that influences this error rate is the noisy characteristics of the telephonic recording, which contain conversations with many speakers. Another factor that influences the quality of recognition is the Polish language, which is highly flexional language, and it has high freedom of word order, which impacts the quality of the Ngram language models. So the way to solve this, overcome this difficulty, is to have the bigger dictionary. So in our case, the data set, the size of the data set is a limitation. For future works, we plan to work over the noisy method of speech signal, as well as language models which are most suitable for spontaneous speech. Thank you very much for your attention.